how you can ensure your clients are enjoying wildlife responsibly. I'm Jennifer Morris from TTG, and I'm joined by two fantastic speakers bright and early this morning. We've got Andrew or Andy Tate, who is Senior Business Development Manager EMEA at AE Expeditions, and Rochelle Turner, B Corp Impact Manager at Intrepid. Thank you for joining me, guys. If you wouldn't mind starting by just giving us a very short overview just into your respective companies and your roles there. I know, Rochelle, especially you're quite new to your role. It'd be really interesting to hear a little bit about that. But if we start, why not start with you, Rochelle?
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks for inviting me here. So, yeah, I'm really new into Intrepid. For those of you that don't know Intrepid, we run small group adventure travel tours all over the world and go off the beaten track and show people what travel can be in small communities and in places that are really awe-inspiring and just very different and not in the traditional places. So yeah, my role is very new. I'm just over a month in, and we are a very, very large B Corp. And a B Corp, again, for those that don't know, are companies that have to ensure that all stakeholders are accounted for. So it's a company that has to ensure that they are for purpose as well as being for profit. And there are a number of areas that need to be addressed within that, and making sure that all of those areas are part of what we do. So we look after our customers, our workforce, our other stakeholders and communities, and the governance of our operations, and obviously the environment as well. And so my role is to try and ensure that that all happens. And I'm really looking forward to digging more into that as the months go on.
Brilliant. And it'd be interesting to see if more sort of organisations that get B Corp status might create similar roles to yours, because I haven't heard of anyone else with that specific role, but very interesting. Okay, Andy, over to you. Could you tell us a little bit more about AE Expeditions?
Yeah. So AE Expeditions, we are a small ship, purpose-built expedition company. We are an Australian company, and we've been traveling to the fragile polar regions for 33 years now. So we're very much one of the pioneers in the expedition space. Like our awesome colleagues at Intrepid, we are a B Corp certified company, and we are actually the first solely cruise operator in the world to have that status, which we're really super proud of. I think it goes hand in hand with our destinations being focused on Antarctica and the Arctic being so precious for us to have those right moral spectrums that we work with every day. So taking clients to these ultra remote destinations and seeing these last sort of hidden vestiges of the world, but making sure that when we're traveling there, it's positive impact and protecting those destinations and the amazing wildlife that can be seen. So that's how we like to operate.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And just to kick things off, Rochelle, if we start with you, obviously we have, as an industry, as a world, come quite far in terms of sort of enjoying wildlife more responsibly. But I think everyone would agree there's still quite a long way to go. What would you say have been the sort of biggest wins in this area over the past 10 years or so? I know Intrepid actually has a specific sort of timeline that is sometimes shared. I know, for example, you ended elephant rides in 2014, which seems quite ahead of the curve. Sorry if I'm taking away from what you're and then if you could come on to what you think sort of still needs a little bit more work in this area, that would be fab.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'll just pick up on that. So yes, back in 2014, we as a company decided to stop elephant riding, and elephant shows were never part of our trips, but the elephant riding were in particular, they were something that we did do up until 2014. And the reason we stopped that is because when we dug into it, we realized that elephants as wild animals, the only way to get them to a stage where they can be friendly to tourists and doing these kinds of riding or other activities where tourists can touch and be part of elephants, is that they have to be broken down, and they have to have their whole being broken, and that often involves very unfriendly animal practices with chains and whips, and it's not very, very pleasant. And so when we discovered that this was the way that animals had to be trained in order to be able to be put in front of tourists, we decided that that wasn't a practice that we wanted to be part of at all. And luckily that caused a bit of a ripple effect, and other companies sort of stood up and said, oh, why are you doing this? And we were quite open with the reasons for it. And lots of other businesses followed suit. And so where elephant riding did come across as being quite normal. I think others now understand the sort of the cruelty involved, and they're looking for other ways to see these beautiful creatures. And I think generally animal welfare is becoming much more a part of responsible travel, and responsible travel obviously is growing. More people are understanding how they have a role to play in making sure that destinations and environments and animals are looked after and are safe, and that's fantastic. I think in terms of where we need to go, there, and I'm sure Andy can speak to this a little bit more, but there's been a big move away from marine parks with captive cetaceans. Jet2 recently stopped that, but it's still a huge industry, and we need all companies to stop these practices and really treat wild animals as pure, and stop treating animals as pure entertainment, and change the way that wild animals are being used in tourism.
Yeah, brilliant. And Andy, what would you say, sort of stemming from that, some of the biggest no-nos? I know Rochelle's just kind of touched upon one of the main ones there that we're all probably quite familiar with. What would you say are the biggest no-nos around wildlife tourism? But then also, some of the perhaps more subtly problematic activities or events that clients may not be aware, or agents might not even be aware, are an issue as much.
Yeah. So I think the simple sort of overarching theory when we look at the biggest no-nos in wildlife tourism is looking at wildlife as a set attraction. I think if you ever look at something where a wildlife activity is coming in at a set time, where animals are trained, where the animals are going to perform, that is the simple biggest no-no. So if you ever have a situation where animals are going to perform tricks, or you've got sort of like a set thing where you're going to come and see this experience at one time every day, that's the easy way of noticing when it's a unethical wildlife practice. I would also look at thinking of locations where you wouldn't expect to see animals as well. So in places like North Africa, it's still quite common to see like snake charmers or guys who've got monkeys performing and things like this as well in markets. Very, very unethical. And like Rochelle says, you can easily tell this when the animals are always chained up and locked into a location or in a cage. When it comes to subtle problems, again, it's where Rochelle talks about cetaceans. There's obvious places that we know are really bad ethically, but there are also places where there is a big argument from some factors that it could be ethical, where others will say no. So looking at places like aquariums, generally aquariums around the world, in the developed world, are there as part of conservation in the same way that you find with zoos. It's there to make sure to look after endangered species, but cetaceans is just something that never, in my opinion, works for aquariums. If you're looking at whales, average whales do traverse more than 3,000 miles a year. They have warmer climates for birthing season and mating season, and then you often go to colder climates for feeding season, and they'll travel thousands of miles in migration twice a year very easily. If you're in a aquarium, even if they are saying they're trying to conserve endangered species, you're ruining the natural sort of circadian rhythm and natural hunting instincts of these animals. So it can be argued that it's a very unethical practice, whereas actually the partner behind it is saying it's a very good ethical way to sustain an endangered species. As a general rule, when it comes to aquariums, all over Europe, places like Canada, Australia, they have banned this. You cannot see them, but certainly places like the United States and in places like Asia as well, you will see whales in aquariums. So it is like education of knowing something. Is it actually helping someone, or is it the equivalent of greenwashing and saying, oh, we're actually helping, when really is it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think we'll come on later to the kind of question of what agents can perhaps say to clients who are, adamant that they want to go to some of these attractions because, that it's just part of what they've grown up, knowing about and looking forward to seeing. I suppose around that, really, in terms of making things a bit more formal, Rochelle, does Intrepid have any specific policies in place when it comes to kind of experiencing wildlife? And I suppose there's the different aspects of, like you say, just encountering wildlife when travellers are away, but then actually incorporating it into trips as well is probably slightly more, a little bit more sort of detail around it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we have a long history of protecting animals in the wild, because that's where we think that wild animals still belong. And one of the ways that we decided to ensure that the policies that we've got are robust is we teamed up with the NGO World Animal Protection. And so we worked with World Animal Protection to create a policy that helped guides how we conduct our animal experiences and the interactions on trips. And so that involves actively discouraging customers from taking part in activities that harm animals in any way, and writing about this on our blogs and through our social media channels, and training our leaders and talking to our leaders, and who again talk to our customers. And also, I think there's the wild animal behind me, a big fluffy dog you might see in a minute. Just making sure that everyone is aware of why we take this stance, and then to be able to question and help break down some of the barriers to understanding. And part of what we did was we created with World Animal Protection an animal welfare toolkit. So this is an open source toolkit, and it is available for other companies and anyone else who is interested in how you go about implementing ethical wildlife practices into businesses. And so it's a great resource for travel agents. So there's a 10-step guide to developing more animal friendly practices within an organization. If you are a company and are looking to develop an animal welfare policy, there's a how-to guide within that on how to do it. And then there's like a template, a policy template that's there, and you can just edit it and drop in, your company and the things that your company does, and just to try and make it simple, because this is really important that we all are on board with protecting animals, because it's one thing for the two of our companies to do this, but we need everyone to make sure that animals stay wild and stay protected.
Yeah, that's it. And you wonder whether sort of in the future there might be some sort of legislation that might come in, more sort of far-reaching globally. But anyway, thanks, Rochelle. That sounds like a really interesting toolkit actually for agents and others to go and have a look at. Andy, appreciate AE Expeditions are more sort of marine based. I think you actually have a percentage for us there. If you could just fill us in a little bit about the kind of policies that are in place for you guys and what you guidelines.
I mean, we're really fortunate in the polar regions that we have really strong governing bodies that look after the wildlife and natural habitats. So what we offer in terms of our sort of like certifications and things as well, it's something that all operators into the polar regions look after, which is great. But things like the IATO, which is the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, and IACO, the Arctic Expedition Cruise Operators, do set out boundaries that we work with to keep safety involved. And for us, polar does make up 95% of our program. So it's great to have that sort of ring fence that comes in there. But we very much sticking and say, like, we'll focus on whales because marine life is the majority of the wildlife in our destinations. We do work together with other operators to make sure that we're looking after whales. You've got sort of set processes that come in mind. So we can't, for example, approach whales from either behind or the front because they can't see and their radar doesn't pick it up in the same way. If we are close to whales, we need to be at an idle engine. We can't go faster than a 5 knot speed. And you've got to, if you do sort of see whales from the side of the ship, then we need to stay at a 400-meter distance. The interesting thing is because where we operate with our wildlife, it is full wildlife and we're going into the natural habitats and it can't be controlled. The whales don't have this message. The whales don't know the regulations that are in place, so they can come to us very, very closely as well. So, for example, we all have seen it with dolphins as well, when whales and dolphins do the bow riding and come to the front of the ship and follow the bow. For example, in that situation, we've got the whales that are 1-2 meters in front of our ship, so much closer than what the regulations say. But in a situation like that, our policy is that we need to keep the ship running at the same course and the same speed so that you're not disturbing the whale flow when it's going. And then at the point when they are ready to pull away, they will pull away from you. It's the same actually we have in Antarctica with penguins. So for penguins, we need to stay 5 meters away from them. The penguins don't know this. The penguins don't have any natural predators at this point, so they're very, very curious. So you can stay 5 meters away and keep walking further and further back on the ice, and they'll come to you. So very much like we have these great sort of policies that are involved. If we, for example, see whales in a location and we know there's another ship nearby, we will speak to the other company, the other tour operator, and say, hey, there are whales where we are, so you don't come too close. So they're not going too fast, for example, to disturb the wildlife as well. So there's lots of different things that are voluntary, but also organized in our spectrum, which helps.
That's brilliant. It's good to hear you're sort of collaborating there with other organisations, because I suppose we all agree that when it comes to sustainability and wildlife in particular, it's not a sort of competitive space, is it? It's great to kind of be communicating so that, as Rochelle said earlier, we can be having a bigger impact as a whole. I'm really keen. We're fast moving through the session. We've only got about 15 minutes left, 30 minutes left. But I'm really keen to talk to you both about your case studies, because I know you shared a bit of information in advance, and you both got some really interesting examples of work you're doing around wildlife, and some sort of specific examples of things that clients can perhaps get involved with as well. Should we start with you, Andy? Sorry, as we're on you already. If you talk to us a little bit about some of your programs, that'd be fab.
Yeah, so we've. I think what's great is that we have things that we work behind the scenes on, and things that clients can be actively participating in as well. So if we're looking at behind the scenes, there's the South Georgia Habitat Restoration Project, which has happened in the last sort of 15 years. So this was the government of South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands were aware that their migratory bird populations were depleting quite fast due to a rodent infestation. So they worked with all Antarctic tour operators and expedition lines who were going into that region as part of a rodent removal program. So they're an invasive species and they were destroying the bird population. So this involved various levels of baiting over I think it was a 6-year period. The various expedition lines were taking the scientists out there because there is no permanent population on South Georgia. So we were the ones ferrying the scientists out there to do the program. And it worked successfully. And now bird populations are very, very much higher. I think about 50-60% higher than what they used to be. And the rodent population is gone. We do continue to work with the South Georgia government. So when the ships come into the Falkland Islands, they actually have 2 patrol dogs who come on board to check all the ships for any rodents that could be coming into the area. And those are things that we work on in the background. However, for clients, I think this is amazing for our travel agent partners to be able to promote when it comes to expedition cruises, is citizen science programs. So these are participatory programs that are on board all of our sailings. And I know a lot of operators have these around the world as well. And these are ways for clients to get involved with research and scientific research in various different programs to help protect wildlife. And they're really easy access. So the program I'd probably mention, again, speaking on whales today is my forte, is the Happy Whale program, where we encourage clients to take photos of the fluke of the whale, which is the underside of their tail. So a whale's version of a fingerprint. And what we do is we get those photos, the clients can send it to the Happy Whale program, and then the Happy Whale program will actually email back to the client and go, oh, that's Steve. He has been in California 6 months ago and he's now in Antarctica. So we're following the migratory patterns of the whales, and we're giving these scientists the opportunity to see where whales migrate to. And it's really fun and easily accessible. And even to a level of, if there's a whale that they're not studying, they will email your client back and say, we're not studying this whale, would you like to name it? That's something they can pick up and learn while they're in Antarctica, but it's super easily accessible. And if they've got the information of Happy Whale, they can continue following them back in the UK, or if they go to somewhere like Vancouver or other destinations where whales are prevalent. So really easy access, and particularly for kids, it's an amazing way to get kids engaged.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. There's some really interesting examples there. And Rochelle, I don't mean to rush you, but we do want to come into a Q&A soon, but just coming over to you as well about some of the work that you guys have been doing.
Yeah, I mean, we have a program doing very, very similar work, taking pictures of the whales flukes, and it's just fantastic to get people involved in that. One of the programs that I really, really like is a partnership that we have with a group of women who are the only female anti-poaching unit in South Africa. And they are called the Black Mambas, 36 women who make up this group, who are working really, really hard to try and prevent the poaching of animals, particularly rhino, on the edge of Kruger National Park in southern Africa. And so as part of what we do is we go on our groups, and customers can stay overnight at the Black Mamba headquarters, and they can join a bushwalk, and they can learn about how these women are taking care of their land, but also about how they became involved in becoming part of the anti-poaching unit, some of the challenges that they face, some of the ways that they have had to protect the animals, and some of the challenges around, the kinds of things that poachers are doing to come into this area. So it gives our customers like a real chance of really getting to know some of the challenges of what poaching is about, and the huge industry that's behind it, and how these amazing women are really taking on board the challenge of protecting the land. And then, of course, swapping stories by a campfire is, it brings it all home in a really lovely kind of way. So I think the Black Mambas, I think, is probably one of my favorite examples of how we're trying to go about doing this. Although all of the trips that we have that involve wildlife, every single one of them will support a conservation project in the communities that are around those wild animals, or actually for the animals themselves. So there's a lot, as Andy said, behind the scenes and in front. There are a lot of animal welfare organizations that are part of what we do, because we have to protect these animals if we want our future to be able to take people to them.
Brilliant. That sounds really interesting. I'd love to come on that trip too. I'm sure lots of agents will be looking into that. So we've got 8 minutes left. I think there's one question from the viewers. So we will come on to that in about 3 minutes. But if we can quickly explore just one of the sort of more interesting questions I thought that we had that we discussed in advance, guys, just about how, if an agent's got a particularly persistent customer who is very adamant that they want to take part in an activity or book onto an activity that the agent might not feel comfortable promoting. Do you have any kind of tips for them in that regard? I know Andy, we talked about this before. I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. I'm personally of the view that the agent should be free to double down and say no if they don't think it works in their ethical stance. I appreciate that's so easy to sell because we've got to have that view, but an agent is selling and it is their business and they obviously still need to make money. That's a very oversimplified way of looking at it, but I would certainly look at some operators. So, for example, Inside Asia Tours, who I know are part of the Fairer Travel Week as well. They have an amazing policy when it comes to wildlife where they sort of say we have 0 snow monkeys involved. And that is when they will operate, a client has got a desire to go to somewhere that they don't believe is ethical, they will happily provide the option for the client to stay in the closest city, but they won't provide them transfers to the attraction, they won't provide them tickets to the attraction, they won't provide them information on how to get there. If the client wants to do it, they can leave the client to make that decision ethically themselves, but they won't provide it. And I think that's the way that I would personally sell it as well. I used to be an agent myself, and that's the way I would take that opinion. So if the client's desperate to do it, you can look around doing the rest of the trip, but avoiding that one particular activity and let the client make their own mind on it if they are insistent.
Yeah.
I think just adding on that, absolutely. But our role is to help our clients to make informed decisions. And so, helping our agents to understand why certain practices might not be those that we would feel are best for the wildlife, and making people aware of the reality behind some of these experiences and perhaps help them change the mind. And if they can also have a couple of alternative ethical options up their sleeve to be able to say, well, actually, these are the reasons why we wouldn't want to sell that. And as Andy said, perhaps we won't sell that if we can get to that stage. But here are the things that actually will probably give you a far more enjoyable, enlightened, awe-inspiring experience, and really that's really what we're trying to sell.
Yeah, so switch selling.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We do actually have some great questions now in the panel, so I'll just come on to a couple of those if we can. We've got 5 minutes left, so sorry, we try and keep it as concise as possible. So the first one was from Rob Perkins, who said, good to read Intrepid Travel's guidelines also prohibit elephant bathing. It's a very problematic activity due to the issues of control and safety, but does bring in vital tourism income for otherwise ethical sanctuaries. Where does the panel stand on the grey area of sanctuaries needing to bring in funds, but observation-only tourism still being pretty under the radar? So I suppose it's that sort of intersection between, wanting local communities to be able to earn money, but, needing the rights of the kind of wildlife to be protected as well. Either of you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll start on that. I mean, we absolutely believe that sanctuaries, the good sanctuaries, are places that could be visited. And we do visit a number of sanctuaries that involve wild animals in captivity, where that facility is directly helping and has the best interests of those animals involved, the highest animal welfare and conservation standards. And one is in Laos, in Mandalao Elephant Sanctuary, 11 elephants, the history of demanding physical labor. And here they're really, really looked after. And they're free to feed. But just a few months ago, we actually decided that another sanctuary, this one in Borneo, was a monkey sanctuary. It really wasn't living up to our standards because it had sort of crossed that line between where animals are being cared for and allowed to live freely in the wild, and then those that are, as Andy said earlier, animals that are given at set times for food to be provided, or we saw pictures online where customers were getting too close to the animals and touching and taking selfies with the animals, and all of these things really go against our own guidelines and what we think is right for wild animals. And so we actually actively spoke to the sanctuary and told them of our concerns, and then said, right, we're not going to go to that place anymore, because it has to, regardless if it's in the wild or if it's sanctuary, it has to still stand up to the standards that we've set for animal protection.
Okay. We've got a couple of similar questions from Pooja and Marie. Marie says, how can travel agents effectively influence tour operators who are still selling unethical wildlife attractions? I suppose, other than not booking with them. I don't know if you guys have any other tips on that.
I mean, I think that's the easy first step, is to be not booking it. And I think, certain activities, certain locations and experiences have dropped in popularity, certainly from the UK market in the last few years. There's not as many people selling them. And I think tour operators do listen to this. But I think as well, if you've got a particular partner who you love working with and they're selling something that you think is unethical and it is coming to a red line for you, reach out to your BDM for that tour operator and say, hey, I want to have a discussion with someone. You'd be surprised how open a lot of tour operators are to connecting the agent with product managers and with other members of the team in operations and stuff to learn about this. At the end of the day, we all love working with our travel agent partners. We as a company are 95% travel agents in the UK. So our business exists purely for our travel agent partners. So if you do have those questions, reach out to your BDM, and the BDMs will be able to contact you with other people in that tour operator to get that dialogue going between you.
Interesting. Thanks, guys. Right, we have 1 minute left. Let's see if we could just rattle off a little bit, any answer to this. How can we as tourists make our feelings heard over and above financially? So I suppose this is Janet Taylor. I think she's talking about if you were in a destination and maybe there's some practices going on that you weren't comfortable with as a tourist rather than an agent. Is there anything in particular you can do to try and help influence that at all?
I mean, for us, our customers are the eyes and ears on the ground, and it's their regular feedback that comes back to us, which we log. And we've got this huge spreadsheet, which has all of the logs in all the places in the world that tells us what people have seen. And then we then take action where we feel action is needed to speak to those suppliers or speak to the destination and say, look, come on, this is not really something that should be practiced. And so I think it is just about telling as many people as you can in those positions where they can make change, and trying to see whether, it's not just something you keep to yourself, it's something that you share. And the more that information gets shared with the right people, chances are that more change can happen more quickly.
Okay. Right, guys, thank you so much for that. That's gone so quickly. We've through half an hour there already. We managed to cover a few questions there from the viewers. I hope we've answered some of your questions well. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy and Rochelle. The next session is Recognising Sustainable Experiences with the GNTO and Explore. So do head over to that. And thanks again, Andy and Rochelle.
Thank you.